That's it. Nice. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I know we're running just a little bit behind. We had just a couple of technical difficulties trying to get all the things that we wanted to do for this, but let's get on it. So hello, my name is Cullen Vance, and welcome to Using Game Design to Inspire Engaging Classrooms. We're going to go through quite a lot of information here today. In fact, I'll just be completely honest and tell you. Oh man.
Go ahead. You're live.
Are we on? Are we good?
Yep.
See, technical difficulties. We're figuring it out. It's live. That's what happens when you sign up for a live something. It's real life. So yeah, like I was saying, there's honestly way too much information in this presentation. However, I think that the parallels between teaching, education, and game design are too various for me to just sweep most of this under the rug. So I'll be moving at kind of a fast clip, even faster now because we're running a bit behind. But here's what we're doing today. So I've put this into 4 levels. I thought that was a good idea for game design. So the game plan, level 1, we're gonna be talking about the aim. With traditional education, traditional way of looking at teaching, game design takes a different mindset completely about what it is that we're trying to create. So we're gonna define that first. Then we'll move on to the 4 principles of game design. There are far more principles than that, but we'll just cover the main 4 that I think are really gonna jive with what we're gonna go for. Level 3 is gonna be talking about flow, that psychological concept, and what it is and how we can bring it into our classrooms. And then level 4 at the very end, just some kind of hodgepodge put together, proven ways and tricks to increase flow. Before we get into that, let's just talk about quickly, who am I? Who is this person who is talking to you? And what makes me qualified to do this? Good question. I'm glad you asked. So my name is Cullen Vance. Nice. This is just a little page from my website. I'm a professional musician. I'm a professional storyteller. I'm a theater artist. I direct around town in Eugene, Oregon. I'm also an actor, so a lot of acting and theater is going to come into what we're talking about today. I also do 2D, 3D, stop motion animation, but the 2 big hats that I'll be wearing for today, I am a teacher, but I'm also a game designer. This is Circle. This is my gaming company. We've put together 6 titles that have been released out, all with varying degrees of success, mostly incredibly silly, which might surprise you seeing as I'm such a serious person. So this is what I've been up to, learning how to do games and how to incorporate theater, storytelling, music, animation, all into one big experience. So now that we know who I am, let's go ahead and jump right into it. This is level 1. And the question that I want to ask is, what is it that we actually give to our students? The first thing that might come to mind, or at least I guess what should come to mind on paper, is information. It is our jobs as educators to give pieces of exposition, information to our students so that, is that fitting on there? Nice, okay, good. So that they have that, they do well on the tests, this school looks good, and then we do it again next year. However, those of us who really are passionate about teaching know how boring that is and how inefficient a way of spending our time. I'm just going to go ahead and go that far. It's not a fun way to spend our time on both sides of the classroom. So I'm not going to say that it's information. I'm not even going to say that it's grades, or you could even further say life lessons or philosophies. The thing that we give to our students, ultimately the only thing that we have to give, our only currency as teachers, is experience. And if you think about it, and there's going to be a lot of philosophy in this short little thing here. If you think about it, your entire life is just a series of experiences. And like I said, experience is the only currency that we have, and they even say experience is the greatest teacher. If experience is the greatest teacher, you should absolutely invite that person to your classroom. The thing with it is that we're not trying to, shifting our focus, shifting our aim. Instead of going into creating your curriculum, creating a syllabus with the idea of how do I get information and put it inside students' heads, Let that go. Let that go for now. We know how stressful, we know how much work that really is, and ultimately how hit and miss it can be. Instead, let's think like a game designer. Whether you're designing a new form of Duck Duck Goose or Call of Duty, they all have the same principles, because all of them are trying to create something that is an experience. And if you think back to the teachers that changed your life, it's probably experiences. Like the time that Mr. Reiner brought his wife in because she had a pet lemur, which is like not legal where I come from. But that was just a huge experience, and we learned so. It was in biology class. It was perfect. Totally had us engaged. We had an amazing amount of information come in, and it didn't feel like we were learning. I have a couple of examples here. I'll have to tell them a little more quickly because we are so late as it turns out. Experience puts you in charge. Of course, you are already in charge on the front end at the very beginning. But experience means that you take responsibility for everything that's going on in the classroom. Not that you have to enforce having a good time, but you become the permission giver to create the opportunity for something special to happen. So this is an extreme example. I taught at the high school level. I taught theater for about 2 years, which isn't very long, but I've been teaching theater through workshops and things like that ever since. I learned so much my first 2 years of teaching. The stick, the thing, the experience that I had figured out was on the very first day of class, and we all know how important the first day of class is as far as establishing yourself with your students. I would have the students come and sit down. I was a theater teacher, and I would explain who I am, I would explain my qualifications, and then I would say, please get your stuff and get out. And of course you get these looks like, what? Yes, leave the room. Everyone up, out. And we vacate the room. I turn the lights off. We go out, and this was in Springfield, so it actually led out into an alleyway. So we were actually outside the building. We go outside, and what I told them was that when you go into the theater, when you cross the threshold, you are signing a contract with me, with the theater gods, with the curriculum, that you're saying yes to what's going to happen inside of there, even if some of it is uncomfortable, even if some of it is difficult. Never too difficult, never too uncomfortable, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But that was the agreement. And of course, this shifted the entire thing. Instead of the bunch of teenagers coming and going, who's this guy? Why should I trust him? You know, what's this, whatever, I gotta read this, so it's the first day of school, doesn't even count anyway. Shifts everything. That little surprise, that idea of taking their expectations, throwing them off the table, set up the momentum for the entire semester. Now, some of the greatest things that we all enjoy as human beings are experiences. And if you think about, these are some pictures of some of the experiences that have really moved me. So you'll see here at the top, it's a dark ride. It's Pirates of the Caribbean from Disneyland. Oh, and one of these is covered up by my face, but I'll explain what that is. That are some of the most imaginative, creative people in the world created that ride for you to ride through, to create an experience, not to teach you anything, though you learn actually quite a lot as you're going through, but to give you an experience. The other one here is Star Wars, that opening scene there. You're brought to a different world, and when people see that, it's the experience, not the exposition, not the names of the characters, the idea that it's happening. The other one here is BioShock, which is an incredibly immersive game. And then right here was just one of a book, because all of these aim to create experiences. The thing that the 4 of these do, that I'm going to, the first kind of call to action of this program, every single one of these, except for the book, because that's a little bit more generic, when they were created with the user's experience in mind, which is always what a game designer is trying to think of, how to get into that experience, trying to get into the heads of your audience. We as teachers, the students are our audience, and the classroom is our theater. And these productions and any other experience that has moved you started with someone sitting down, thinking about it, and going, how do I create something that These people had the audacity to try and create something that would change people's lives, or at least make an experience that they couldn't forget. We're teachers. We are in charge of this space. We are in charge of the theater as much as we can be, right? There's still curriculum, there's still things we have to push through, still rules we have to follow. But instead of thinking about information, creating experience. So that's the first thing that I really wanted to lay out there. Now, there's the parallels between game design, theater, show business, and teaching are innumerable. And the first rule of show business, as many people know, is know your audience, which is also true for game design. Except this isn't just knowing what your demographic is, or knowing maybe what their interests are. In game design, you are called to know your audience better than they know themselves. And for those of you who've been teaching for a while, you probably already know what I'm talking about. If you have students that are constantly complaining that, I wish this class was easier, blah, 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 where they're kind of moping, you know that their subtext, what they're actually asking for is more. They want structure, or they want risk, or it's coming from a place of boredom, right? We know this. It's the same way with every other part of this. Know the audience and know them better, try to at least, better than they know themselves. I'm not talking details, I'm not talking backstories, you don't need to know the middle names of all your students. But creating a space where you can listen to your audience and react and change the curriculum right in the middle of it to best suit what's going on. So this is kind of the weird part here. I created a short little experience, and I'm going to be putting up the link to this afterward. But as I've said, I'm a game designer, so I actually went ahead and I created something here. Let's see if I can get it up. Now, unfortunately, I don't have access to looking at the live stream. Oh yeah, so let me get this all set up. So hopefully this reads, and if it doesn't, then that's all right. You'll get the idea. It's a bit of a silly little thing. But I decided to create this. It's called the Student Simulator 2000. Now this is going to be available for you to play as soon as we're done here. This is a little 3D, it's not really even a game, it's just an experience you can see on the board there. I hope you can see. I can scoot this a little bit closer actually. Let's see. We're live.
Pay attention.
There we go. So this is just a short little classroom environment. Now the reason I made this, and if you like the jumpsuit orange as well, no metaphor there I'm sure. I created this so that we could remember, because I'm convinced that there's a part of the human brain that does not want to remember being a teenager, my brain included. However, if you're teaching high school or junior high, in some ways even worse, as far as trying to remember, there are parts of our brain that we can access. We can remember what it's like to sit here and to look that we got the person up front, the person who's teaching, but just looking around, what is so much more interesting? Everyone else? You got computers back there, and all you're thinking about is the computers. You started looking at the TV, and you started like, what are those speakers? And then, of course, the blue sky outside the windows. And this is just a very short example about how hard, I know you teachers already know this, how hard of a theater the classroom really is. Nice. Oh, you're going here? Or switching back?
Switch back.
Sweet, perfect. So that'll be up for you to play. I put a couple little extra Easter eggs in there just for fun if you want to do that. I highly recommend doing it. I made it kind of as a joke at first, as just a fun little way of spicing up this presentation, but I was moved by the experience that I had thrown together, because sitting in a classroom, you remember. Oh, and did we skip far? No, that's right. Oh, here we go, I lost my thing. Okay, there we go. what happened to me at least is I remembered my objective. Now we're going to be going to level 2 here, but I'm going to kind of spice it up just a little bit. As teachers, we have objectives, we have goals, right? Our goal is to get information into the students' brains so that they can have richer lives, but also do well on test scores so that everything looks better school-wide, get more funding, things like that, right? What is the student's goal? On a broad scale, on a more general scale, you can kind of think about it just for a moment, and here's my theory. You can chat at me a little bit later, or with each other right now if you'd like to kind of discuss this. The student's goal, in my opinion, is to survive. That's what mine was in high school. How do I get through today? I used to bring a deck of cards and I would learn, like, just practice shuffling until the teachers took that away. I would bring, like, toy cars. I would doodle all the time. I would doodle all over up and down my arms because you can't take those doodles away, that kind of a thing. And we remember this, right? And of course, on the teacher side, it's infuriating. Just pay attention. I'm trying to help you. We're trying to get this whole thing done. So let's actually move on to level 2. The 4 principles of game design. Like I said, these are just the 4 that I picked. In fact, one of them I made up. You can tell me if you like it or not. I won't tell you which one. But it goes to our first one. The first principle of game design is play the same game. Now this seems very elementary, but just in what I've described, you can see that this is not what happens in the typical classroom. Let's think about games first, real simple. If a bunch of kids, or adults I guess, want to play Duck, Duck, Goose, but half or even just 3 of the kids think that they're playing Monkey in the Middle, chaos, because the objectives don't line up. Part of the class or part of the group wants to do one thing and they're operating on a completely different set of rules than the rest of the group. You, as the teacher, are the odd one out, unless you are also telling yourself, I just need to survive, which might be the case. In that case, then this principle actually will be much easier for you. The goal, the idea of how do you fix this, you need to hijack their game. You can do everything you can to create rules, create rewards, create punishments to try and get them to play your game. They won't. They're playing their own game, coming with their own rules. All of them are varied, right? Individual to individual. However, you, as the person in charge, as the game designer, the designer of the experience, you can align yourself to their game and then hijack it. You can start playing Monkey in the Middle and somehow, without anyone really noticing, it's Duck, Duck, Goose. Of course, that's much easier said than done. Actually, it's not very easy to say either. But it's definitely much more easier said than done. The way to do this is to give them what they want, which is another show business rule. That must be number 2, give the audience what they want. But also, you can think about the class, listening to them on a different level. If you have students, and we know these students, all they want is attention. They just need it from the classroom. They're going to get it. If it's breaking rules or breaking things or whatever it might be, they need that attention. And instead of, though it's not every case, right? But instead of punishing them or belittling them or any of those types of things, give them what they want. How do you change the experience, the game, so that that person, Jimmy or Tandra or whatever, they get what they want, the attention? Suddenly, you hijacked their game. You're playing on their rules, they're playing on your rules because suddenly you have the same objective. It's aligning up as you're going through. So that's the first one. Make sure you're playing the same game. It's also a really good life philosophy as we go through too. Number 2, how am I doing on time? Oh wow. We're just gonna keep going, let's see where we end up. Number 2 is games need rules. Now we know this, game without rules is chaos or a puzzle. Even though puzzles have a couple of rules. But games need rules, and more importantly, the rules need to be clear. They need to be understood 100% by everybody. Otherwise, people might cheat, or they might break the rules, or they might not want to play at all if they think the game doesn't make any sense. Now, there are of course rules as far as like dress code, being on time, things like that. Those need to be enforced, those are always going to be there. I'm talking about experiential rules. So I'm skip a couple of these examples, but the one that really stood out to me in my own career, I worked in a theater, and in the theater it is bad luck to whistle. It goes way back, way back. But whistling in a theater is super bad luck. You're gonna have a light fall on you or something like that. Now, I'll be honest, when I first started teaching, I kind of believed in the superstition. I really wasn't 100%, but I thought, hey, that might be a cool way of teaching respect for people's beliefs, but also respect of the art and the tradition of the art. So I'm gonna enforce it. I'm gonna enforce it like any other rule, no whistling. So I didn't get anyone in trouble. If they whistled, I would just get hurt. I would, because they betrayed my trust. Only took one time for a student or two to whistle until everyone started enforcing the rules. Now that's the most important part of this. Create rules, no matter how frivolous, make sure they make sense. If they can put together with what it is you're trying to teach, even better. Create rules that you have to follow as well. If the students can call you on something and you go, oops, sorry, and align to it, that gives them agency, it gives them respect in the space, and also puts everyone on a different kind of playing field. You're still in charge. They're still looking to what's coming next. But having those kinds of social contract, that's what I'm looking for. The idea of writing your own social contract for each class, or all your classes, however you want to think about it. And if students get annoyed by it, I promise you, in no time at all, it'll be endearing. They'll go, oh, Mr. Vance, you can't whistle, don't whistle. Don't, even if you're outside. I don't know if that's against his rules, but don't whistle. They'll love it. Students of all ages, I'll argue even adults, strive for things that they can hold on to, structure. And that's really what comes down to rules. Rules, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into, actually into this next part as well. Rules become the structure for which the chaos can kind of sit upon. Yes, my classes got pretty over the top. They got really loud as a theater class. People running around, jumping, screaming. Sometimes we were pretending we were 2 years old. Chaos. More chaos than I think very sensitive teenagers could probably handle, except that it was built on rules and it was built on a structure that everyone agreed to, everyone knew was still there. And so the chaos could exist simply because they had something to hold on to. So let's keep going. Number 3 out of 4, oops, 3 out of 4 is that games need to be beatable. Now we know this, and I think it's within every teacher's knowledge on the intuition. I need to tell the students that my class is winnable, that you can succeed, of course, right? Unless you're in Whiplash or something like that, that movie, then you're not really set up for success. But we know, we want the students to know. In game design, when I say games need to be beatable, it means that they need to know that they're getting closer to beating. Immediate feedback is what it's called in the business. This idea that, okay, let me give you an example. I designed this game that was very silly. It was for a company down in Southern California called Battle Santa, which it's a little 8-bit, like think Mario, Santa Claus with a sword, with a long sword, killing zombies. It's wonderful. It was my son's favorite game, probably, of all time, except for Kung Fu Panda. No, I'm getting off track. Now, I first designed it so that Santa would go over and start chopping at the zombies. However, I knew that in the code in the game, their points were racking up. They were doing really well. They needed to hit like 3 or 4 more times and the zombie was going down. But I didn't put any code in or any animation or any way for the player to know that their hitting was doing anything. And you would be surprised at how quickly humans give up when there is no feedback. Just think about someone who's never used an iPad before, clicking on the iPad button. If it doesn't do anything, they're done. This thing's broken. So fast, so fast. Humans are exactly the same way, humans are the same way in classes as well. Am I getting this? Am I getting this? If they don't get an answer, if it's vague, if the goals aren't clear, but they're trying, they'll stop trying. They need to know that they're making progress, even if it's the sense of progress. And that's where it kind of gets a little more vague in there as well. The kind of 3 things you need for clear goals: they need to be concrete, they need to be achievable with the sense of achievable. It needs to be in the air. We can do this. And as a teacher, you need to know that they can do this. And they'll pick that up in the frequencies. And it needs to be rewarding. We'll talk about how to make goals and learning rewarding all on its own in just a moment. Yes, okay, let's move on. I gotta take a breath for a second. I'm just fitting in. We're going through this very quickly. If I really zoom, we could maybe still end on time. You're still getting all of the information, just a couple examples being cut out. Okay, so the very last one is that games are interactable. Now, I'm going to cause a couple of waves here with probably some teachers. Maybe not, but maybe. A game that isn't interactive is a movie. If your class is not interactive, I would argue that it's not an experience. Right now, of course, I'm on a YouTube video. There's not much interaction happening between us right now. It's kind of a weird situation. But in a classroom, if your lessons can push play, you do the same exact thing you always do, and it ends. Every time you do that lesson, no matter what happens or what the students say, you haven't created an experience. Unless you are an incredibly talented performer and can really hold an audience that whole time, then go for it. You probably don't even need this lesson then. In fact, I could probably learn a lot from you. But what I will say is, don't push play. Enter into it. Discover what the lesson is before you go. Absolutely, plan it all out. I've got my notes, right? Get your notes, have your syllabus, know what you want to accomplish, have your goals, all of those things that we teachers are taught to incorporate to help us succeed. But also leave room for interactivity. One of my favorite things to do is to ask questions or to get students talking about what the lesson is, and then incorporate those things into the lesson. And sometimes I get really surprised, especially, for instance, I was doing a theater game, and of course, you gotta change this to math or history or whatever. I was doing a theater game where we were talking about power and how much power people have. And one student had the idea that why don't we play charades? We'll walk across the stage and we'll try to guess what the power number is. First couple of things in my mind were like, okay, well, not everyone's gonna wanna do this. How are we even going to judge this? It's going to get old really fast. So I was like, no. But then I had the idea, whoa. Saying yes is way more important than all of these other reasons that I've come up with. If I had come up with it on my own earlier, then maybe I would flesh it out. So I said yes, and we played the game, and it was fun. It did get old quickly, but the idea that students could raise their hand and change the outcome of what today's thing was all about, it gives them agency, it gives them respect, it gives them the power, it makes them engaged. I mean, that's the whole title of the course, right? When you know that you matter, when you know that what you say and the things that you're going through are being heard, are being seen, you can't help but look away. So I challenge the teachers watching this and whoever else to incorporate this last game principle. Games are interactive. Of course, this takes a bit of vulnerability and it takes risk. It's scary. I'm not gonna lie, to show up. Especially if you've got, in some of my classes, we was pushing 30, almost 40 students. That's a lot of pressure. And it's scary to get up, try and create an experience, try and create something that is controlled, has structure, but still chaos, but then leave room for discovery. But what you'll find is, oops, I broke my pen. But what you'll find is, over and over again, is that it makes it so much more fun. So much more fun. And plus, no one wants to push play on themselves anyway. Okay, so that was all the way through. We're now going to take a brief very brief intermission. And that was it. End of intermission. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's keep going. Level 3, what time are we at? 6 minutes? We'll probably go over. I think I owe it to you to go a little bit over. I think we have the space for a while, so we're fine. Yeah, okay. Brief intermission. I'm sorry, I just love puns. That's also, it comes into it. Okay, so level 3, good games create flow. Now, flow is kind of like a hot word right now, and it's been talked about, I mean, literally for hundreds, thousands of years. In some cultures, it's a meditative practice, but what I call it is just getting in the zone. What a lot of people call it is just getting into that place. We've all had this experience, whether during sports or intense gaming sessions or anything like that. When you get so into something, time goes away. You just feel in it. You feel in the zone. You're just going. The real psychological term for this is called flow. There are many, many books out there. One of them called Flow, and I highly recommend it if you're interested in this type of neurobiology. Now, really, when it comes down to it, flow. Well, actually, I think I have the definition here. Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Though, will I be able to read it on this tiny little screen? Let's see. I have it here. Flow, as defined, is the mental state of operation in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized, focused, full involvement and enjoyment in the process of the activity. Now, in education and teaching, flow is like a rarity. It's like, ooh, we had a class and things were just happening and it was just going and then we ran out of time. And it's like those moments that you live for, but they are fleeting and they seem like magic when they happen. For artists, especially for athletes, flow is not magic. It is a process that they enter into, that they go into, and then can create results every time. And the challenge, the real challenge of game designers is to create experiences of flow for people who might not have access of other ways of achieving a flow state, like surfing or skydiving or something like that. Game designers want to create games that make you lose track of time. Now, the benefits of this, and this is where it really gets interesting for teachers. When you are in a flow state, and this has all been tested, in fact, I think there's something called the Flow Genome Project going on for about 5 or 7 years that studies the biology and the chemical processes that happen during flow. And what they find is that your brain releases just an incredible amount of dopamine. And we know what that chemical does. It's the happy one, right? So it makes you feel good, makes you feel accomplished as you're going through. And dopamine, by its very nature, is addictive. It's what makes us love learning. It's what makes us love playing. And flow states can create high levels of performance while releasing just so much good feeling. It just feels good to be in that state. Game designers, that is 100% the goal. Create flow for people. What if we as teachers try that same approach? Because if you got a whole class into a flow state, you could give them as much information as you want and they will retain it. They will keep it. And here's the best part. Because of all these chemical processes, they'll want more. The actual act of learning, not getting the stuff in, not even the aha moments that we talk about that we love, but just the act, even the struggly parts, become I don't even know what else to call it, a chemical dependency. We can get kids addicted to learning. I know this is kind of outlandish language for this type of thing, but it's really, that's the power of this kind of stuff. Okay, so I have this chart here, and this is, I've got 3 charts out of 4 to show you as far as how flow works. Flow is all about balance. Now, this is a very famous chart called the challenge/skills chart. Let me see if it's showing up here. Can you see? Oh, good. Right here on the side, you see that we have challenge. It's going from a low challenge to a high challenge. And then skills. You've never, ever done anything before, all the way to you're a master expert. And right in the middle there, you'll see that there's the flow stream, flow channel, that's what it says there. If you're below the flow channel, which in my opinion is where most classrooms stay, sometimes consistently, even if skills are getting better, it's boring. Things are very predictable, they know what's happening next, and you cannot enter a flow state when you're intensely focused and time starts going. You can't get in the zone if you know what's coming. If you can see things 3 steps ahead, but we're just waiting and waiting and waiting, and eventually they're gonna start playing a different game. That game might be stay awake, or that game might be can I sneak Skittles out of my backpack, or things like that. As you go up, you can see that on the other side, and we can play inside the flow channel, but the other side is, some might argue, more dangerous than boredom, which is anxiety. And I think on the very high end, you're just going pure panic attack. That's when we're not sure what we're doing, the skills and maybe the goals are unclear, but the challenge is high, the pressure is high. And what that creates is a place where you cannot be engaged because you're just trying to survive. For me, in my educational experience when I was a student, I was either on one side or the other. I was bored out of my mind or so stressed out I couldn't retain or learn anything. You as the game designer, as the experienced designer, is to how do I keep it in this spot here, in that flow channel? On a one-on-one basis, it's much easier because you're just dealing with one person's needs, one person's skills and challenges. On a class-wide basis, it gets a little bit more complex. I'm not gonna lie, it definitely gets difficult in some situations depending on age ranges and things like that, but it is possible. And luckily, I have a bunch of tips and tricks of ways of triggering flow states. So burn this image in your mind, because really this is what it all comes down to. Now I've got a couple more here, and I'll go through this fairly quickly, though I honestly don't think we have time to go through it in as much detail as I would really love. This is another example of the skills and challenge chart here on the left. But you can see that it shows you a little diagram, almost like the recycle diagram, of what happens inside of there. Now, if I zoomed inside, what you would see is this little graph here on the right, this red line. This is what's called an interest curve, and pretty much every single game designer that has studied any type of kind of formal game design knows this chart. Usually, oh, I can use watch this. Is this a good spot here? Yeah. Now, usually when we think about stories, when we think about experiences, we were taught to do this. Right? We were taught the rising action or exposition, rising action as we go through, and then there's some kind of climax, and then boom at the end. Or sometimes it looks something like, is this going to be a right spot? These are nice whiteboards. Or sometimes it looks something like, whoop, 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 wow, like that. Now, you see that's a little bit closer to what's going on here, and this isn't bad. A lot of good books that do this, a lot of good movies that do that. But if you think about the best movies, the best experiences that you have gone through, don't they look a lot like this line? And over and over and over again, this is what we see. That human beings, whether they're watching, this line actually comes from the Art of Game Design book. Jesse Schell, who wrote the book, got it from a professional magician. That this is how he designed his shows. He would do something really big to hook, then your second one needs to be not as good, because you're still reeling from the first one, and then up, a little bit down, way up, and that's your finishing. I could talk so long about how this comes into just about every single experiential, how do I say this? Experiential? I can't even, I've been talking way too much, my mouth is all messed up. But every moment, there we go. Every kind of momental experience looks like this when done well. When not done well, sometimes you get a great hook, right? We've read this book, boom, and then it doesn't go anywhere. Or you get those TV show seasons that are like, oh, stick with it for the first 3 seasons and then it gets really good, maybe, no. I've watched those shows over and over and over again. Not the same one, of course. You know what I'm talking about. So think about this. Inside, that this red line is what's happening inside the flow channel, kind of chart within a chartception, as we're going through. And of course, this can exist for one class, like one day. This could be how you outline the week. It's really good, that's what I used to do. Or it could be an entire semester, an entire year. In fact, I would argue that maybe it should be all of those things. You might as well tap into the psychology that's already there, that video makers and game designers have already been using to make your classes the most grabby as possible. Okay, let's keep going. Now, I put this last one in here because I know that's a lot of information. So this one's nice and simple. You can burn this one in the moment, in the heat of the moment of teaching, everything going on. Just remember this one. Too low, boredom. Too high, panic attack. Right in the middle, green zone, zone of optimal performance. If you follow this idea of staying right where it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's still comfortable enough and we're kind of jiving, no one's having panic attacks and no one's falling asleep. If you do that and listen to your audience, everything else, the red line, will happen all on its own. Human beings and teachers are kind of designed to make these kinds of things happen. So worst comes to worst, just burn that into your retinas and know what that looks like. Okay, let's keep going. Level 4, look, we're doing so well. Level 4 is the proven ways, tips and tricks to increase flow. Like I said, this is kind of just a bunch of things all put together. Some of the ones that I think really fit. Most of them are philosophy. Some of them you might not even agree with or think that's not, you know, I'm teaching a history class, that's not going to work, or biology or math or whatever. Pick and choose in this one. Less principles here and more just, yeah, tips and tricks. So let's keep going. Ooh! As I go through these though, I have to say a warning. Don't use too many of them at the same time. I know it might be tempting to be like, ooh, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, and make the best class ever. You'll make something very exciting, but it will probably freak everyone out. Remember the balance between the two. So through all of these, not too much. Stay away from the extremes, otherwise you can lose students' trust. You might become too unpredictable. So let's jump into it. So these are flow triggers. The first one is surprise. Now this one probably doesn't come as a surprise. I've been talking a little bit already about how to get people in. Think about movies, you can think about books and the ways that they can kind of hook you as you go through. Some of the ways that I used surprise in my own teaching, the first one is the get out. That was a really effective one. During finals week, sometimes my classes would be way too tired to get any type of real work done. So I would call nap time, turn the lights off and have the students lay on the ground. And if you don't think that high schoolers would take that seriously, they absolutely do, because they need the sleep. 15 minutes and 2 minutes and they're asleep, and I give them 15 minutes, and when they woke up, they were ready, they were jived, and they felt like they had been taken care of. The classes where I taught were an hour-and-a-half long sessions, because every other day kind of a thing, so I could afford 15 minutes. I know for other people that might be way too much time for the limited time that you might have, or spaces or resources. Traveling is always a good one. If it was a really good day, whether or not it had to do with the class, sometimes I would have them just go and we'd just sit outside and talk as we went through, and sometimes just that change, the surprise, is enough to really make something happen. Sometimes I'd also have them sit on the floor, sit on top of their desks. You can incorporate music, anything that is different, surprise. Not too much, you don't want to scare the pants off them or anything like that, but just enough to make them think, oh, this is different. Oh, this is an experience. Okay, so the next one is familiarity / honest environment. Now, this is something I really believe in, and something I think a lot of people have a hard time with because it's scary. A familiarity in this sense is a place that they know they can trust, which is why I also added an honest environment. In game design, this shows itself when you're playing a game that you're not sure if you can trust. If you play games like from the 90s and things like that, the controls sometimes weren't reliable. Or you'd fall through the floor or something like that. It's hard to commit or to get it even close to a flow state in a world that you can't trust. And in a world where maybe there are elephants in the room. And I think that's actually what I'm trying to talk about right now. So for instance, through our interaction, even just right here, I can name a couple. I called out that this is live. I called out that we were running late, and being honest about what's going on. It creates a familiarity. I could sit here and pretend like we're sitting in my home office as we're going through, but that wouldn't be genuine. And even if you couldn't pinpoint it, though, who has these? Maybe I should get one of these in my office. You would feel it. You would smell it. And I'll tell you, kids smell it when something isn't right. So if there's an elephant in the room, like perhaps you're teaching, here's an example. I was teaching at a thespian conference in Salem not too long ago. They told me that 150 students were going to show up, and three students showed up. Now, I had all the notes and everything prepared for 150 students in a ballroom, but I had 3 students in a ballroom. I could have not taken this piece of advice and done everything the way I would have done if there was 150 people. But instead I said, oh, there's only 3 of you. Well, and it all became much more informal, which is totally fine. And because I had addressed the elephant in the room, everyone got to relax, got to trust in the process and know that it's a little bit different. That isn't to say making excuses for, my computer broke and that's why I can't. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about leveling with them so that they know that you're not trying to hide or put something on that isn't really there. Okay. The next one really ties in with surprise, and that's novelty. And novelty is a cheap trick, but it works. And if you've got a class that is engaged, you've built momentum, and you've created experience after experience, and every class is something that students are talking about, even if they're learning the Pythagorean theorem, they're like, oh my gosh, Mrs. Whoever did this. You can get away with doing these type of novelty things where maybe I used to wear ties, and I would wear different ties based on what it was that we were doing today, and students would sometimes try and guess what the experience was going to be based on what tie Mr. Vance is wearing. That's a very novel thing. Doesn't really matter. Gets them engaged though. And you can say it's cheap, but really it just becomes endearing. The other examples I have here is you can bring a prop. I had a statistics teacher one time in high school who brought in a giant bag of M&Ms. And we did calculations, statistical guessing, using everything that we had learned and created graphs about how many red M&Ms there should be in the big bag. And then he had us all count, we all wore gloves, all count them out, and then we got to eat them all at the end. That's pretty novel. It's a pretty cheap trick. Give chocolate to your students. But it really works. And all these years later, here I am talking about it. Okay, so the next one is a bigger philosophy kind of a thing here. This is stakes and risk. You got to be careful with this one. This is one that we usually think at the very front when it comes to games. If a character dies in their game, then we need to take all their money away, or the vibrator needs to go and the screen flashes red. We need to punish the user for not doing it right. Because that's a game, right? No. Actually, the studies have shown over and over again that little to no punishment in games works, and high reward. Even if it's something as or ba-bum. So that's talking about that, especially in free-to-play games like on your phone and stuff. You'll notice that they hardly ever punish you, but they reward. It's kind of casino logic in that way. That's on the gaming world. When we put this into the classroom world, punishing becomes way more intense, right? Even if it's something as simple as, something that could potentially be embarrassing for a student if they get a question wrong or something like that. I've had teachers in the past that had terrible rules about their students' phones going off, things like that. I'm sure a lot of you have stories as well. The stakes and risks that I'm talking about are things that get the students engaged in a way that they need to team up. These are shared goals, a shared risk. So sometimes what I would do is, first you gotta listen to our audience, you gotta know what they want. I knew that when I was teaching at the time, Frozen was really popular, and I knew that they, as the musical theater crowd, would really love if we could watch that. So I threw it out there that if they did these, I mean, I'm talking like these were really big kind of projects, that if we got them done 2 days early, then we could watch Frozen one day and then one movie for people who hate Frozen. So it was 2 days that I was giving up, which is huge. It's a risk on my end. But I knew that if they accomplished this, that I could take those days off. They could take those days off. And the students rose to the occasion. Now, it was a risk that was ultimately going to be a reward, not a punishment. And if they didn't get it, they ended up getting it. But if they didn't get it, it wasn't the end of the world, wasn't traumatic or anything like that. So with stakes and risk, can really, really jump into it, but make sure not to take it too far and keep it fun. Keep it fun. Okay. The next one here is anticipation and hints. So my tie was kind of this kind of thing, this idea that I do know what's going on, I do know what's coming next, but also putting it out there and knowing that everything that they're doing is building up to something. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about momentum. If you can wow them, like that first spike, right, that hook in the red line. If you can wow them on that first day, and then the next day is another great experience, and then another great experience, and another great experience, all the while telling them that the best is yet to come, which means that you gotta have something right at the end that is the best, or at least the most intense, or the big reward if they succeed. For me, it was relatively easy being a theater teacher. When I told them the very first day of class, this is when we finally got back in, that their final project was a showcase in the theater, because the school had a theater, with lights on, all dressed up with the audience, with all their parents, and we're gonna do scripted scenes. Huge. For some students, they're like, absolutely, I will never ever do that, right? Even if they signed up or got forced into the theater class, never doing that. What I told them was, everything that we have planned from here to there will make you feel 100% ready if you say yes to it as we're going through. And that anticipation, that promise of something huge, of that climax at the end of the semester, was the context for everything that happened leading up to it. I mean, even things like the movies and things like that become the context, the social contracts and all of those finally get to the end. And I'm probably going to talk about this in just in a moment as well, but if I don't, I want to hit it right now. Creating experiences is not an easy thing. No one's going to ask you to do this. I mean, I am right now. This is the one chance I get right here to ask you to do this. You're in charge. You went through all of those years of school not being in charge. Watching that person up there, if it's anything like my educational career, you just feel like I could do this better, I could do this better, I could do this better. Maybe with time I could do this better than what's going on right now. It takes risk, it takes vulnerability, and it takes work. But the trick of it is, or I should say the scariest part, well, both of those, is that you have to have what is the word I want to use here? Audacity. You need to have the audacity to create experiences that aim to change people's lives. We can get away, and a lot of teachers do, I'm just gonna say it. We can get away with doing the bare minimum and then wonder why students do the bare minimum. I know it's gonna cause, I'm glad I'm not looking at the chat right now. But we know this to be true, even if it's not about us. We know people like this, right? Doing the bare minimum, just trying to get the information out, just so the test scores can be great. I know how much pressure there is. But just baseline, get in there, say the things they need to say. If the students don't get it, then it's on them. And if they fail, then it's on them. That can't cut it. Okay, we have this concept, and I'm gonna breaking off script. Hey, open to discovery, right? I'm going off of script here because this is really what it ties into. In theater, we have this idea that is more or less followed. Honor your audience's time. When people come into an audience in the same way that you have here, it is your duty to try and create an experience, to try to give them something that is worth the babysitting that they had to do to get into the theater, the parking that they had to pay for, everything else that led up to it. It is your responsibility to give them something to remember. In theater, in movies, in books, we all understand this as the standard. What if we as teachers aimed to that degree? What if we had the audacity to try and create experiences that when students come into the room, come into the classroom, that they leave going, I'm so glad I came to school today, even if it's just for this one class with Mrs. Whoever, Mr. Whoever. It's huge. I know how much that is to ask. You're already overworked. There's already too much being, there we go. Almost lost everything. There we go. I almost went to sleep because I'm not using my thing here. I know you're overworked. I know there's a lot going on. And it isn't easy. It's not, because it requires an incredible amount of creativity, an incredible amount of focus and work and time that I know you don't have. However, if you can somehow find the time, the energy, the resources to create even just one class that you can feel so good about, that you think students should pay admission to, or pay, whatever it is for their game, they will be focused. If you come in with that kind of energy, they won't be able to look away, incorporating everything else. Okay, a couple more tips and tricks, but that really is one of the biggest things there. So let's keep going. The next one is saying yes. I already kind of talked about this, that idea of students giving things into the space and you being able to say yes to that. But also not enforcing, but creating an atmosphere where students feel like they should say yes to each other as well. That's one of the main triggers for flow. That's from the Flow Genome Project. So I know we're wrapping up here. I'm way over, but there we go. Actually, the time's out just right. The next one is competition. Same as risk. Be careful with this one. You could really hurt people's feelings. The way that I like to use competition, I mean, in video games, it's very clear, right? People shoot each other, people compete, try to make the biggest Minecraft castle, things like that. In classrooms, I like to create competition against people who aren't going to get their feelings hurt, people. So things like the clock, which actually I think is my next one. Yes, is time. Or other classes, or classes in the past, or things like that. Not a sense of false competition, but another way of igniting that competition drive that's almost more in terms with that flow, with that idea of really jumping into it, with clear goals. And then the last one here is contrast, which is something you already have a lot of control over just in planning in what order the classes go and what's going to be brought up. These are like right turns or even 180s on material that you've been teaching that still somehow goes in with what's going on. I don't know how to explain this without just giving a couple examples. The first one is when I took an Eastern philosophy class in college. We spent 6 weeks talking about Atman versus Brahman and Indian religion, culture, and things like that. Which at the very center of it, all that we kept learning over and over in this philosophy is that there is this thing called the self, and the self is unchanging. The self is the thing that you need to find, and if you find the self, then everything is going to be great, and you get it all figured out. That is the supreme goal of existence. And then at the end, oh, it's the next group, huh? Okay, I'll wrap up right now. Oops, okay, here we go. And then at the end, that course, he says, all right, so thank you all so much. On Monday, we're going to be learning about Buddhism, where the Buddha said the self doesn't exist. And that was one of the clearest and most huge teaching educational experiences of my life. Because we had spent so long learning what I thought we were aiming for, and then the teacher goes, something complete is a Monty Python, and now for something completely different. Sometimes that's enough to get students' brains like, what? And I spent all weekend going, what do you mean? And the self doesn't exist? Well, this is all we've been learning about. Those type of experiences, they can get addicted to it. The unpredictability, but built on a set of structures. That's what gaming is. Football, baseball, all of those games have clear rules. Is any game exactly like the next one? No, it's chaos. Complete random probability on top of set structures. And it's why when we can see something, we know the rules of baseball or football so well, and someone makes a catch that is unbelievable, and they did it at this time in this area. If you know the rules and it's all been set up and it's all clear, it feels like miracles happen. But it's just stuff that we made up, right? You can do that in the classroom. I promise you can. It takes work, it takes a lot. And it isn't easy, but oh man, is it worth it. You change every single student's lives and yourself in the process. And that's really what I wanted to talk about here at the very end. Good experiences build momentum. If all of this is building the same way a good book leads you all the way to the end, a good game, you kind of keep playing. Oh, it has to be wrapping up soon. I can feel it's wrapping up soon. I'll stay up till 4 in the morning trying to figure this out. You can do that in your classroom. You can make it so that students talk about the things that you created in the space. When they go home, they go to their parents, their parental units, or wherever it might be, and go, oh my gosh, today Mr. So-and-so brought in an iguana from the zoo to learn about scales or learn about evolution or something like that. And anything and everything in between. That's the kind of stuff that sticks with people. That's the kind of stuff that gets students, no matter how smart they think they are or however they've been told, that's the stuff that makes them want to come to school. That makes them feel bad when they miss your class and they apologize. I'm so sorry, what did I miss? Not information-wise, but experience. Experience, and that's really what it all comes down to. I have done my best to create an experience for you here today. Not much interactivity, wouldn't call this a game design kind of a thing if I had access to the, it's all good. Maybe next time if we do this again. But my job here today was to try and not waste your time, to honor what's going on. I know we started late, we're doing our best. It was scary for me to come and try and put so much in so little information, or so much information in such little time, and talk about such grandiose things to a camera, to a lens right here. Talk about the elephant in the room. Just a piece of glass is what I've been talking to this whole time. Trying desperately, really, to try and get these kinds of ideas through. That's risky. That takes a vulnerability, that even talking about the vulnerability is vulnerable. If you can do that, and I'm not saying it's easy, if you can do that, they will play your class. You will be playing the same game. If you love this stuff, please buy this book. It's called The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. From Schell Games, you might own a couple of his games. If you're into board games, I'm sure you have maybe 1 or 2 on your shelf. He wrote this book, it's huge. That's why the price tag is so much. It's one of those books that aims to teach you something very specific, but accidentally teaches you all about life. Highly recommend it. It takes everything into it. There's 2 more things that I want to say. Just like this game, I want to challenge you to aim to teach something specific, but just like Jesse Schell, accidentally teach everything about life. Create experience. They're giving you your time, whether or not if you're not teaching college and they're kind of legally mandated to be there, but they're still giving you their time, earn their attention, and then keep it as you go through. I do have one more thing in here, and I wanted to make sure that I said it. Here it is. This idea of creating experiences and students going off and talking about it, this is coming from Eastern philosophy. Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching from the founding text of Taoism, has this one line that I love and I must share with you. When the best leader's work is done, the people say, "We did it ourselves." That's our job. Create an experience, run the whole thing where they think you've got it all figured out, and you do at a certain level, but you're also saying, yes, they're in control. They have a sense of control as it's going through. It's all building to something. It's all going somewhere, like a good story, like a good game. And then at the very end, I promise you, they'll say, "We did it. We did it ourselves." So thank you very much. My name is, where is it? Where is my name? Colin Vance. If you like my stuff, or if you like what I'm talking about here, and you want to see how I've tried to apply this to my animations and things like that, you can check me out at colinvancecreative.com. I'm also on Facebook, but I'm most active on Instagram under Colin Vance Creative. You can follow me there if you'd like to see all the things that I'm up to and where I'm teaching and where I'm performing. Know your audience. Give them something to remember. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry for starting so late, but we made up that time, even if it was a little bit later on. But thank you so much, and maybe I'll see you again next time.